In 1977, President Jimmy Carter pardoned hundreds of thousands of Vietnam War draft dodgers, all in an attempt to put the Vietnam War behind us, behind America, behind the United States. The question becomes is whether or not, if Donald Trump becomes the next president of the United States, should he consider some en masse global pardons of people such as, Chris Urban and Matthew Hoover? Let's talk about it when we get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and author of the brand new best-selling book, Israel Disarmed, What the 10/7 Attacks Teach Americans About the Right to Bear Arms. We must always learn from the mistakes and lessons of others, because the most expensive mistakes, or the most expensive teaching moments, are the mistakes that we make. It is so much better to learn from the errors and mistakes of other people throughout history. And I wrote the book Israel Disarmed so that we here in the United States can learn all of the critical lessons of the importance of privately armed citizens, as well as the dangers to being disarmed. Check out Israel Disarmed on Amazon. All right, folks, so we've talked in the past about the case, which is now on appeal, of Chris Urban and Matthew Hoover, who were convicted in federal court in Florida for various issues associated with the auto key card, allegedly for using this auto key card to function as a machine gun conversion kit, and for structuring violations supposedly in the order of magnitude of $68,000, which for anyone that does any kind of civil litigation realizes that amount of money is a paltry sum in the grand scheme of litigation in American life. Nevertheless, the ATF and the federal government and the Department of Justice went after Matthew Hoover and Chris Urban and convicted them. And now they're in prison, serving, I believe, 5-year prison sentences. So without getting into the details of that case, which we've talked about previously, a couple things I want to mention. The first is, because it's possible, no guarantees, but it's possible that the next president of the United States will be President Donald Trump in January 2025. We in the Second Amendment community need to start thinking about, we don't have to do anything formal, we don't have to write a big document or anything like that, but we need to start putting our collective heads together and reflecting on the sort of things that President Trump, if he is reelected, if he's elected again, could do to advance notions of the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms and the like. And one part of this chessboard, not the only part, maybe not even the most important part, but one part of this chessboard might be to identify people, cases, situations where Donald Trump can exercise his presidential power that is not reviewable by anybody else, his presidential power to pardon people for crimes that they have been convicted of or have been accused of or might be accused of in the future. It seems to me one possibility are people like Chris Urban and Matthew Hoover, who are convicted by the ATF and the Department of Justice under Joe Biden for what are classic malum prohibitum crimes. Now remember, here on the Four Boxes Diner, I teach you things, and then we build upon the lessons and I connect them up to make you the smartest person in the room. And we've talked repeatedly about certain things that I want to make sure that you understand. No matter what your educational qualifications are, it doesn't matter. I will make you the smartest person in the room. Even if there's federal judges and fancy lawyers with fancy degrees in the room, I intend to make you smarter than they are, regardless of where you come from. And I think I can do it on the topic of the Second Amendment and gun-related issues. And in light of that, we've talked about the difference between crimes that are malum prohibitum on the one hand and crimes that are malum in se on the others. Crimes that are malum in se are legitimate, real crimes. Those are things that everyone understands across the globe, across history, of being evil, immoral, period, full stop. Murder, rape, robbery, fraud, burglary. Things that are just inherently evil, that everyone intuitively understands them to be evil. malum in se. But what's happened, of course, in the United States is we have had an explosion of the other type of crimes. These other types of crimes fall into the other category that are not malum in se crimes. They are malum prohibitum crimes. Now, while malum in se crimes are evil in and of themselves, malum prohibitum crimes are just the opposite. Those are crimes that are crimes simply because the legislature has said so. The length of the barrel on a gun is an example of this. The number of inches, perhaps, that an elevator clearance path has to have. The incline on a handicap ramp. You see what I'm saying? These are crimes that are crimes simply because they've been enacted by Congress, federal law, or state legislatures. There's no moral component to the length of a barrel. There's no moral component to banning a machine gun. Right? There's no moral component or nothing naturally evil about any of this stuff. But that doesn't mean it's not a crime. It's a malum prohibitum crime. And it seems to me in the Second Amendment community, we don't have to have all the answers today. There's a lot of work between now and January 2025. A lot has to happen, of course. But we should begin to start to think about examples of injustice, examples of wrong things that have occurred by this Biden Department of Justice, and I have many off the top of my head. We don't need to get into all of them now, but we probably will at some point in the next many months. But an obvious thing that requires, to me, a serious look at is all these people that have been convicted under investigations by government agencies such as the ATF under the Biden administration, who's made it a point to bend over backwards and to bend every rule and interpret every regulation and law in such a way that law-abiding gun owners that just want to exercise their right to keep arms find themselves in hot water legally. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law. We don't want anyone to break the law. We want everyone to follow the law. Even if the law is unjust, we should still follow the law, because I don't want anyone who watches this channel to get into trouble. We need everyone in the Second Amendment community. We want you to be free. We don't want you to get put in prison. We don't want you to have to go through a criminal case or anything like that. And we don't want that at all. But with that said, it's pretty clear that there are instances of injustice in the world. This has always been the case, going back to the beginning of time. The world is not always just. It's not just for all people. And when it comes to Matthew Hoover and Chris Irvin here, both of whom were convicted of a clear malum prohibitum crime. These are crimes of allegedly selling, this auto key card, which is allegedly a machine gun conversion kit. Now, I'm not a metallurgist. I'm not a super gun technical guy or a gunsmith or anything like that. In fact, I'm sure most of you out there are superior when it comes to gun technology in terms of being able to make things and manipulate things and fix guns and reload your ammo and make ammunition on your own and all that stuff. I'm sure most of you out there are better than I am at this kind of thing. It's not what I do. But it's pretty clear to me, though, that, or at least it seems to me, shall I say, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical with my basic knowledge of metallurgy and basic knowledge of technology and basic knowledge of guns and explosions that cause guns to go bang and to work. I'm skeptical as to whether or not an auto key card could possibly be a realistic machine gun conversion kit. Now, maybe it can. Now, the ATF apparently said that it was a machine gun conversion kit, that it did work, they can make it fire, all this stuff. But as I've told you before, if I were a prosecutor involving the Matthew Hoover case or the Chris Irvin case, I'll tell you what I would have done as a prosecutor. I would have insisted that the ATF film, start to finish, and I don't care how long the film lasts, if it lasts 8 hours, I'd want that film, start to finish with no breaks. I'd want them to take an auto key card, and I want to watch them convert that auto key card, insert it into a semi-automatic firearm, and convert that into an automatic firing weapon, and to see that it actually works. And if I, as a prosecutor, did not see that process from start to finish on tape, with no breaks, I, as a federal prosecutor, would have been hesitant to bring such a charge or to try such a case. But of course, I've never been a federal prosecutor, and that's fine with me. And, every prosecutor has to make their own choices, and they all have bosses, and they all have agendas, and they all have, things they have to do at the Department of Justice, and they got political issues they sometimes have to deal with. So, whatever the prosecutor did in that case, well, they have to make their business choices and move forward with the decisions they make as trial lawyers. So I'm not here to get into a big debate about the particular case, but what I am saying is, given the fact that in 1977, Jimmy Carter pardoned hundreds of thousands of Americans who had dodged the Vietnam War draft. And that is not the only en masse example of presidential pardons. At the end of the Civil War, there was a mass pardon of Confederates. Likewise, I believe there was also a pardon associated with those that did not comply with essentially the draft, or the version of the draft involving World War II. And that was done, of course, by Harry Truman after World War II. Now, it seems to me that with these historical precedents of presidential pardons applying en masse to large groups of people that have been treated unjustly in some way, or have dodged what was viewed to be an unjust law in some way. Okay, I'm not weighing in on the presidential pardons in the past. I'm just telling you what happened factually, that these occurred. It does seem to me that a concerted effort by a future Trump administration should be to look very carefully to see how many people who have perfectly clean records, who've never hurt a fly, have never engaged in any sort of physical violence on their records or anything in that respect, and yet have been convicted of some sort of malum prohibitum crime by this anti-gun and Biden administration that has demonstrated, by virtue of being reversed repeatedly by the U.S. Supreme Court, has demonstrated their desire to reinterpret laws in a way that makes it harder for people to exercise their right to keep and bear arms. And in light of the Biden administration, I would look very carefully at convictions brought by the ATF in conjunction, of course, with the Department of Justice involving any malum prohibitum gun-related offense. And I would look very carefully if I were part of, let's say, the Donald Trump Department of Justice, or anybody maybe in the White House counsel's office, and I would look very carefully to see if some people got caught up in the net of the anti-gun Joe Biden who have no connections whatsoever to violence or immoral conduct, i.e. malum in se type conduct. And I look very carefully at that to see if there's people like Matthew Hoover or Christopher Urban who should be pardoned by President Trump. Certainly, Donald Trump has pardoned people in the past, and I suspect he, if he's president again, will pardon people in the future. And I think we in the Second Amendment community should start to think about this. And one last thing I want to mention to you, keep in mind that presidential pardons only, as a general matter, pardon you from federal offenses, federal crimes. It does not serve as a pardon for state. So if you're convicted under a state law, presidential pardons as a general matter, are not going to help you. So just be aware of that as we move forward and reflect on this topic, which we do need to start thinking about. I'm not saying this is the only topic to think about in the conjunction with a Trump administration in 2025 and the Second Amendment and gun-related rights in the ATF policy, but it's certainly something that should be on our list of things that we need to be thinking about and cogitating over in the Second Amendment community. So there you have it, folks. Just something to think about. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner, and we will see you again soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.